All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really plunging into two powerful forces that shape our inner world: anger and desire.
Indeed, we're going to unpack their connection, which is surprisingly deep, based on some specific source material.
Yeah. And importantly, look at a systematic approach to managing anger that comes from these texts.
That source material, just so everyone knows, comes from excerpts of a PDF called Anger and Desire. Specifically, we're looking at verses 26 to 29 of chapter 5 from a text called Gita for Joyful Living.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the key insights. What do these texts tell us about how anger and desire are, fundamentally linked?
And, maybe more practically, what specific steps are suggested to actually gain some control over anger, according to this particular perspective.
Exactly, because this isn't just abstract philosophy, right? These are ideas for managing emotions that affect everyone every single day. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the core idea right at the start of this source material, it's quite striking, actually.
What's that?
It describes anger as the twin sister of desire.
Twin sister. Wow. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? Like they're inseparable.
Pretty much. Born together, linked at the hip, as you said.
So they're not just related, they're intertwined.
Exactly. And the crucial implication drawn from this is that it's considered very difficult, maybe even impossible, to truly control anger without tackling desire first.
You can't really resolve one without looking squarely at the other.
That's the idea presented.
So why? Why are they so tightly connected that you have to control desire to control anger? What's the mechanism described?
Well, the source explains that the way to dissolve desire, it happens when the mind gains this deep intellectual conviction.
Conviction about what?
Conviction that there's really no lasting happiness to be found in the objects or experiences of the world, the things we chase after.
Okay.
When that understanding truly sinks in, the mind, it says, will naturally just stop desiring those things.
And link back to anger then. How does that work?
Well, the text states it plainly. When there are no more desires, there won't be any anger. Because anger, in this view, it arises from desire. Frustrated desire, unfulfilled desire, threatened desire. It all stems from that.
So this source is basically saying anger is like a symptom or a consequence of desire.
Pretty much, yeah.
And if you deal with the root cause, the desire, then the anger problem sort of takes care of itself.
That's the fundamental link they're drawing. Desire is the ground, and anger grows from it.
Okay.
But, the source is also realistic. It acknowledges that reaching that state of no desire, that's a long journey.
Right. That's not an overnight thing for most people.
Definitely not.
Which is, frankly, a bit of a relief. Aiming for no desire right off the bat sounds, pretty daunting.
It's a high bar.
So until you get there, does it offer any, practical steps, things you can do now?
Oh, absolutely. It lays out a systematic approach to work on reducing anger, even while you're still on that bigger path of addressing desire.
Okay, practical steps. That sounds helpful. How does it suggest we start?
The principle is that anger shows up on different levels, right? In our thoughts, our words, and our actions, our deeds.
Right.
The text suggests controlling it systematically, but interestingly, in the reverse order of how it appears.
Reverse order. So you start with the most outward expression first, the actions.
Precisely. You begin by controlling angry deeds, then move on to controlling angry words, and only then do you tackle the toughest level, which is angry thoughts.
Okay, let's break that down. Step 1, controlling angry deeds. That feels like the most immediate thing, the first point of impact.
And it's presented that way, as the first and, relatively speaking, easiest step. Especially if your intelligence, your rational mind, has some decent control over impulsive reactions.
Okay, and the practice?
It's pretty straightforward, conceptually at least. When you feel that anger rising, be extremely cautious about acting on it. Make a firm, conscious decision. My physical actions must be totally controlled right now.
Why start with actions? What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the source points out something we probably all know. We often really regret impulsive things done out of anger.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
When you're angry, your mind isn't clear, right? It doesn't function properly. So you make decisions, you do things you wish you could take back. Stopping the action prevents the most obvious and often the most damaging consequences.
Makes sense. And it suggests, a very specific technique to help with this control over deeds.
Ah, yes, it does. It mentions deciding to donate a huge sum of money to a good cause every single time you express anger through your actions.
A huge sum. Wow. Okay, that's a serious deterrent. What's the logic behind such a drastic consequence?
The purpose, as explained, is that if you actually follow through with such a significant consequence every single time you act out in anger,
Yeah.
it helps your intelligence gain strength.
Yeah.
Enough strength to override that impulsive urge from the mind to just lash out.
So it's like training your intelligence.
Exactly. It trains the intelligence to take charge by making the cost of immediate angry action very, very high. Very tangible.
Okay, so the first line of defense is stopping the physical action. And the source suggests using this powerful material consequence, a big donation, to basically train your inner intelligence to put the brakes on. Makes the control feel very real.
Right. Then, once you've made some headway with deeds, the focus shifts. Step 2, controlling angry words. The next level outwards.
Okay, words. Still external, but maybe a bit trickier than actions for some people.
It can be. The goal here is the same principle. Consciously control the words you speak when you're feeling angry. Don't let them just fly out.
And is there a similar training method suggested, like the donation?
There is, but the text makes a distinction here. For controlling angry words, it suggests deciding to donate a fixed sum of money to a good cause whenever you let angry words slip out.
Okay. A fixed sum for words versus a huge sum for deeds.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What do you think that difference implies?
Well, it seems like a graduated approach,
Right.
maybe acknowledging that while words can be incredibly hurtful and damaging,
They certainly can.
physical actions might often have more severe or immediate external consequences. But the underlying principle is the same. Consistently apply the consequence, make the donation. It helps the intelligence get stronger, better able to prevent those angry words.
So it's a consistent method, just adjusted for the level of expression. Deeds first, then words.
That's the idea.
Okay, now we get to step 3, controlling angry thoughts. This feels like the real deep end, the most challenging part.
And the source presents it exactly that way, as the most difficult step. It even states that it's very hard to do this effectively, unless the overall strength of your desires has already been significantly reduced.
So it links back to desire again, even here.
Strongly. The approach for thoughts is, what's subtle? It's about actively attempting to ensure that angry thoughts, even when they pop up, aren't encouraged. You don't dwell on them, feed them.
But attempting to control thoughts, that feels almost impossible sometimes. How does the source suggest you even start to approach that? It's not like stopping an action or holding your tongue.
Right. And this is where the source brings in a really core philosophical idea to support thought control.
Okay.
It emphasizes that it's crucial to understand something fundamental. You can't actually change anyone else's basic nature or behavior. Not really. Everyone, the text says, functions in a way that's determined by their own, deeply ingrained preferences and their current knowledge. It's like their internal programming is running the show.
A determined manner. That sounds pretty strong, almost like fatalistic. How does understanding that help me control my angry thoughts about them?
Well, the implication is, if you gain sufficient knowledge and truly grasp this principle, you start to realize that the person whose behavior is making you angry often cannot behave differently in that moment.
Why not?
Because they're operating according to their own internal landscape, their preferences, their knowledge, their conditioning. It's not necessarily a conscious choice to provoke you in that specific way.
I see. So the anger inside, at the thought level, might start to lessen because you're not seeing it as purely intentional malice. You see their action as just flowing from who they are and what they know.
That's the perspective offered, yes.
Okay.
The source gives an example. You don't usually get intensely angry with a cow if it suddenly wanders onto the road in front of your car.
Right, because you understand it's a cow. It's just doing what cows do. It's not personal.
Exactly. It's acting from its nature. And the source takes this even further. It says, we often encounter situations that trigger our anger because of our own accumulated impressions.
Our own stuff.
Yeah, our past actions, preferences, knowledge. They've built up these tendencies in us, which also operate in a somewhat predetermined way based on our current state. And following the same logic, you can't really blame yourself for those impressions either, because they were formed by past actions based on the knowledge and preferences you had back then.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to unpack. So the anger we feel in our thoughts keeps happening when our knowledge is limited, when we don't fully get this complex dance of everyone's conditioning, including our own.
Precisely. If our knowledge, our understanding is limited, we keep getting caught in those angry thought loops. But with enough knowledge, the source suggests we shouldn't entertain that anger, even internally. It's clear this step isn't just about techniques, it's about a fundamental shift in how you see the world and interaction itself.
Okay. So let's say someone works through these 3 steps. They gain more control over angry deeds than words, and they start making progress on managing angry thoughts through this deeper understanding. What's the payoff? What's the outcome described in the source?
The text states that once these 3 steps are significantly advanced, progressed through, that person will be relatively free from the effects of desire.
Ah, so it circles right back again. Mastering anger seems to loosen the grip of desire itself.
Yes, they're presented as so deeply interconnected that systematically addressing the symptom, anger, actually weakens the root cause, desire.
Interesting.
And the source really hammers this home. It emphasizes prevention. It says we should strive to avoid anger, fear, irritation, all these negative emotions, because desire is the single underlying cause for them.
There's that core link again, very direct.
Extremely direct. It's impossible, from this viewpoint, to truly get rid of these negative emotions without getting rid of desire.
And desire, as we talked about way back at the beginning.
Right. It's only removed when the mind genuinely gains that deep conviction, that real understanding that there's no lasting true happiness in the objects and experiences of the world.
Okay. Which brings us back to that longer-term path, dissolving desire completely. What does the source suggest as the very first step on that specific path?
The first step mentioned towards dissolving desire and therefore preventing these negative emotions right at their root is to gain that intellectual conviction we discussed.
Really internalizing the understanding that worldly things don't bring lasting happiness.
Exactly. Getting it not just as an idea, but as a deep understanding.
And what's mentioned as the next step after gaining that conviction?
The next step discussed is the practice of meditation. Specifically meditating on that fact that there is no enduring happiness in the objects of the world.
And the source gives a role for meditation here.
Yes, it calls meditation a tool to refine the mind to see the truth.
A tool to see the truth.
That's how it's framed. And the verses referenced towards the end, 5.26 to 29, they generally support this overall path. They link freedom from anger and desire to achieving liberation and peace through practices that explicitly include meditation.
Okay. Well, this deep dive has really laid out a clear framework from the source material. We've explored how anger is seen as fundamentally tied to desire.
It's twin sister.
Right. And then we looked at the systematic 3-step approach to managing anger, starting with controlling actions, moving to words, and then that really challenging inner work of controlling thoughts.
Which connects back to gaining that deeper understanding of ourselves and others and how desire works.
And the text suggests that mastering these steps helps loosen desire's grip, ultimately preventing those negative emotions right at the source.
That's the overall picture presented.
Yes, and the path forward, it seems, involves gaining that intellectual conviction about worldly happiness, or the lack thereof, and using meditation as a tool to help the mind really see that truth, the truth that dissolves desire itself.
That sums up the core message regarding anger, desire, and control in these excerpts.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider as you go about your day, drawn straight from this perspective we've been discussing. If others truly cannot behave differently in a given moment because they are, well, operating based on their own internal programming, their preferences, their knowledge, and if we ourselves are similarly influenced by our own accumulated impressions, what does that perspective fundamentally change about how you view conflict, how you assign blame? What does it change about the very nature of your interactions with the world and everyone in it? Something to mull over.